I'll edit this, but we've started. So
Yeah,
could Peter, welcome. Hello there.
thank you.
Um, and could you briefly explain your relationship with Strawberry Studios?
Okay, so I mean, it's historian really. So I was always interested. From Stockport, and when I was growing up in the 70s, I had two older brothers who were buying records long before I did. And when I looked through their record collections, I would occasionally see recorded at Strawberry Studios, Stockport, and I used to think there must be another Stockport somewhere because it can't be the place I'm living in. But obviously that kind of sparked my interest. And then over the years, I like 10cc, obviously. And then over the years, I eventually liked history as a subject. So whenever I had the chance, so doing an A-level project, I did a project on Strawberry's history and got to go to meet Peter in the studio, which was quite exciting because Sisters of Mercy were in at the time. So I kind
Mm.
of rubbed shoulders with them, which was a very strange experience. But then beyond that, I went to work at Manchester University. And then in the late 90s, I got the chance to do a PhD. And I only ever wanted to research Strawberry's history. So when that was complete, I then moved into kind of just promoting the studio's history through social media and through various events like getting the blue plaque on the outside, which led to the exhibition in 2017 to mark Strawberry's 50th anniversary. And from there, it's just kind of the archive has grown. And my ultimate aim is to digitize the archive so that it's available for everyone to just access. So I'm working on that, and we've just finished working. I've just finished working with Peter Tattersall on his Strawberry memoirs. So all the bits, some of which we'll refer to today, that
Mm.
he felt were important to get out there, which will hopefully be published in the next few months.
I've been going out with a girl, her name is Julie.
Okay, which brings us on to the top 10. So we've each selected our top 10 non-10cc tracks, although there's a bit of a grey line there because I'm sure they will pop up
They will.
as kind of musicians, engineers, performers, writers will see. So may I ask you, Peter, to tell me what your number 10 is?
So a lot of these, I've chosen artists that I wanted to get in there because of their connection with the studio, and then I picked a song.
Yeah.
And this number 10 is a perfect example of that. When I was thinking about Strawberry's history, even including 10cc, there's one artist who's probably recorded more times in Strawberry than anyone else, which when you consider 10cc were there for 7 or 8 years in total is quite an achievement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start with the Sid Lawrence Orchestra.
Right.
So Sid Lawrence first came to Strawberry when it had just opened in Waterloo Road in '68, and it presented Peter with particular problems because he wasn't used to such a large group of musicians. And he tells the stories of having to group them around microphones, getting them to move in and out till he got the balance right. Then there's the famous story that he actually patched the echo plates into the desk the wrong way round. And he thought he was going to have to re-record it until Sid Lawrence said to him, no, that's perfect because that mirrors what you would hear in the concert hall. Because when you're sitting in an audience, you're hearing the reverse of how it's coming out. So
Right.
he was
Right.
happy. Sid Lawrence was happy with that. And it actually coincided, the first album that Sid Lawrence released coincided with a kind of big band sound revival. So Peter is wondering whether, you know, how much of a part he played in that with his recording of the first Sid Lawrence. And then they came probably twice a year for the next 15 years and they must have recorded 15 to 20 albums. I've never actually counted them
Wow.
in Strawberry, including a great one in the 70s covering Lennon and McCartney songs, which is quite interesting. But the one I've chosen is from 1970. And hundreds of thousands of people will have heard this and not realized probably what it was, because it was the theme song for Mexico Grandstand. And I believe it was also the play out song on Top of the Pops at one point. So it was getting a lot of coverage. Sid Lawrence were quite big at that time in that they were about to be part of the Royal Variety Show. They were going to have their own ITV series. So they were kind of a big name, but I doubt anyone knew where they recorded. And I just quite like the fact that the Mexico Grandstand theme, which would have been heard by lots of people, was recorded in Strawberry. So that's my number 10.
Yeah, marvelous. And of course, Sid Lawrence was the father of Martin Lawrence, who went on to,
right.
as engineer, became a very important part of the Strawberry
And
story as well.
Martin will pop up again in various parts of my top 10 too. So yeah, so the Sid Lawrence connection. There was a bit of murmuring because they were on the original blue plaque and they were still on the later one. And I've had various people on social media who kind of say, well, Sid Lawrence, you know, but I think their contribution to Strawberry's history should be marked by their name being there.
Quite right. Well, my number 10. So I don't know that much about this band. I do remember liking this song, and it was a single, but the big hit, I think, was Thinking of You. This was, of course, one of the many bands that Terry Hall put together. It would have been after the Specials and after the Fun Boy 3, I guess.
I think so, yeah.
I think. A really good track. With Paul Burgess playing the drums. I did check because Pete DeFreitas plays drums on some of the album, but
I think Paul did play on this. We played it on the hit single.
Yes.
I don't know about this particular track. But,
oh yeah, no, he did play it. He did play on Castles in the Air because I checked that. 10cc drummer, of course. Prior to lots of other work, but it's just a really, really nice song. Do you know anything about why Terry Hall chose Strawberry? Because he's a Londoner, isn't he?
Well, he moved to Stockport to live.
Actually, he's not a Londoner. He's from Coventry, isn't he? Or is it? Because I'm trying to think where he started out.
I think he's probably Midlands, but he actually moved to Stockport in the 80s.
Okay.
He was a big Manchester United fan.
Okay.
And moved to Stockport. I don't know whether that's connected, but I guess getting to Old Trafford is a lot easier. So based himself in Stockport. So I think Strawberry would have been the natural choice for a Stockport resident. I don't know whether moving to Stockport was as a result of knowing he was going to record, or whether moving to Stockport happened first. But I think that's the reason why he would have ended up in Strawberry.
Interesting. It's an interesting band. I mean, obviously Terry Hall ran all these amazing projects during the years, and that was probably his lightest, most melodic in a way. That project. I was listening to some of the tracks from that album that was recorded at Strawberry, and it sounds like a sort of precursor to Beautiful South in many ways, particularly the one where he's got female vocalists duetting with him on the hit single Thinking of You. But that was just by the by. But yeah, so
that's a lovely song. Yeah, not in my top 10, but I can see why you would have put it there. My number 9, we're moving to 1971,
right.
and 10cc are going to creep in here.
Good.
Very inadvertently, but I have gone for Ramesses,
Right.
the great pharaoh reincarnation, who of course was really a Sheffield central heating salesman, Barrington Frost, who believed he was a reincarnated Egyptian pharaoh, and came to Strawberry to record with, obviously, the pre-10cc musicians as his backing band, and Peter was in the control room as well. And I just like the idea. It's a very Strawberry thing, a kind of Strawberry story, such a strange person coming along, and some of the tales that Peter tells of their time in the studio. Buy the book when it comes out and you'll read them all. But some of them were things like he invited all those in the studio to join him in a bit of naturist sunbathing inside the studio. So I think Peter drew the line there. And he wanted them all to get inside cardboard boxes together. So very strange recording sessions, but the song I've chosen is Balloon.
Okay.
It's the most melodic of those tracks, and I think it sounds quite 10cc-ish actually. So I'm hoping you'll agree when you do hear it.
I'm going to listen to that. I personally, I love the story, and also the fact that it sort of freed 10cc to be really experimental. It was the Ramesses album was very important in their development. But
I know that Kevin in particular has said, Kevin Godley has said, it was that was kind of one of the 3 sessions that kind of led to 10cc becoming 10cc. It showed them something that they could do, albeit for others that but they could then build into 10cc. So an important session, a wacky session, and one that I think produced some quite lovely music. And of course, the album that came out had the beautiful Roger Dean designed sleeve that was based on St. George's Church in Stockport. So even the sleeve has a nice Stockport connection there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful sleeve. Was that one of his first album sleeves, actually? Was
Probably,
he?
Yeah,
I think he was early on in his career, but I stand to be corrected by that. How on earth did Ramesses and Selket, his partner, get a deal in the first place? Was it through Harvey? Do you know?
Yeah. So I mean, not for the only time in my top 10. We'll have to pay tribute to Harvey and his skills in spotting talent that didn't always kind of evolve into a kind of major star, but there's definitely something there, I think, when you listen to the music.
There is. I think his open-mindedness helps, doesn't it? He's willing to consider anything as long as he thinks it's got value, and he's not too worried about like going down the mainstream route. And that's a great skill. I've never thought of this before. Fancy a heating engineer being called Barrington Frost.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing is just wonderful.
Got some good advertising out of that.
Well, here we are in the Strawberry Studios, just outside of Manchester in Stockport, in actual fact, and this is where the Bay City Rollers make a lot of their records. Give a little, take a little, that's what we'll be hearing a lot of. And, well, we thought it would be very interesting to show you how a record is made. So nobody better to tell us than Peter Tattersall, who's the chief sound engineer here at Strawberry. Peter, all these controls, I mean, what do you do with them?
Well, it's a bit more complicated today than it used to be. And also, you can put the vocalists on their own track. Like, we can make 3 vocalists sound like 12 by simply double tracking. That's the term that everybody uses.
Okay,
Be prepared to forsake a little love, and when the sun comes shining through,
sing you will.
we'll know what to do. Give a little love.
It's a very good single, isn't it?
Hey, very good, yeah.
It's a teenage dream to be 17 and to find you're all wrapped up in love. And I found that you made a dream come true. Now I do believe in what they say. You've got to give a little, take a little. Be prepared to forsake a little love, and when the sun comes shining through, we'll know what to do.
Now, please confirm for me, this was actually recorded at Strawberry, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Okay. It was a UK #1. Not many of those recorded at Strawberry. There were a few, mainly by 10cc and one other song that might be in this list, I don't know. But yeah, this was a massive hit at the time when the Rollers were, well, the biggest pop band in Britain. They were hysterical fans.
I was going to say, because Granada actually did a whole series on the Bay City Rollers. So Shang-a-Lang was a weekly pop program.
Right.
One of those episodes did actually feature inside Strawberry. I've never actually seen it, but I've just seen it mentioned in clips.
Oh, yeah, there might be more then.
Yeah, there might be more. Like I say, I've not seen it. I've searched for it, but that episode doesn't always come up.
Right.
So it's worth searching for. And you say fanatical fans, and of course Kathy Redfern, who was the secretary at the time, because we laugh about the idea of fans hanging out of the studio window trying to get inside. And we said that to Kathy, and she said, well, actually it was a bit more serious, because they were actually sending her death threats. So because she was in with the band, and obviously they were stuck outside, and young girls can be quite possessive, and they sent her death threats. And she actually gave us, for the exhibition 5-6 years ago, she gave us an example of a letter she had received from a Bay City Roller fan, which said something along the lines of, you're very beautiful, but you won't be if we get hold of you.
My goodness.
So, and she actually had a police escort home from the studio.
Have you done? Yeah, we've both done our number nines.
We have done, yeah. No crossover yet.
No crossover yet. Okay, what's your number 8, Peter?
Okay, so number 8. I wanted to choose one of many sporting records that Strawberry, I mean, we've done Mexico Grandstand already, but Strawberry was particularly famous for footballing teams coming to the studio. Manchester United came several times, including the famous Glory, Glory Man United. And Leeds United came and recorded the Leeds, Leeds, Leeds song that's still played at the ground today. Everton, Forever Everton, written by Graham, which is still played at Everton today. Several sporting records, but I've gone for Manchester City, Boys in Blue, as an indicative record of the time, you know, a kind of footballing record, which were big in the 70s. Again, still played at the Etihad even today. So when City are on telly, you can usually hear this blasting out in the background. Again, does include 10cc because they co-wrote the song and were there for the recording. I think he would have liked. I think they all said something about supporting United. So I don't know how they felt about playing on a City record, but
Okay,
it's
I've
a
seen the
catchy
clip.
song as well. It's a catchy song, and I quite like it. And I like the fact that, along with all the other footballing records, it's still played even today. So Strawberry's history lives on.
I think it's a great song. I don't know whether I've mentioned this before to you, but on the PRS website, it is credited to probably Graham, Kevin, maybe, and Lol, but also Jaime is,
Oh no, I didn't know that. Okay.
which is well, it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, of course, is that Jaime was a red, not a blue. So,
Yeah.
and the other is that it's the only credit that he's got. I mean, it might even be an administrative error. The PRS website is littered with those things, but
It's definitely not on the record label.
no, I know that. So I was very surprised to see it because Jaime, who, for those that don't know, wrote many of the wonderful lyrics to Graham's '60s songs,
Yeah.
isn't credited officially, but this one time he was. So I wonder whether it was some kind of joke. The fact that he was like writing lyrics for Manchester City when he was a big United fan.
Maybe it was maybe a joke played on him by playing your name
Maybe.
against this record.
Yeah, well, at least you got some royalties out of it, I guess.
Of course, if you, not that we're including any 10cc tracks, but if you turn over the single and listen to the B-side,
Yeah.
Funky City, which is pretty much just a 10cc instrumental with the occasional Funky City chanted. So if you haven't heard that, then do listen to that.
Yeah, it's a good track. Okay, thanks. So my number 8. Is Love Will Tear Us Apart by Joy Division.
Okay, that's my number 5.
Okay.
So we've crossed over there.
We have. I mean, I'm not the biggest Joy Division fan, to be honest. A lot of the music, it's not my music. It doesn't, some of it doesn't connect with me, but it would be really churlish of me not to include this track, which is a wonderful track, and B, perhaps the pivotal track, along with I'm Not in Love, ever recorded at Strawberry.
I think you're right. Yeah, I mean that's why it was my number 5. Obviously, Joy Division recorded their 1979 album Unknown Pleasures at Strawberry, which is regularly voted in the top 20 albums of all time when music papers do their poll. I believe this single was also voted top in the top 50 singles of all time. I don't know, I can't remember exactly, but so definitely an important single. And some of the tales that come out about Joy Division and recording with Martin Hannett, things like Martin turning the air conditioning up in the control room to keep the band out because it would be too cold for them, and making them take their drum kit to pieces so he could record each bit of the drum kit one by one. I mean, some of the tales are amazing. It was lovely as part of John Barrett's Strawberry kind of history things that he does. We actually got Peter Hook into the Strawberry building to have a chat with him Clint Boom did the chat with him, and John introduced me to Peter Hook, saying, you know, a PhD on strawberry. And he then spent the next 2 hours testing me on every part of strawberry history that I wouldn't know. And he did ask what he said, how did we, Joy Division, know that we were in a state-of-the-art studio? And I was thinking, well, you know, was it the equipment? Was it? And he said, no. He said it was because the kitchen was stocked with Vimto. He said they love Vimto, and it was stocked high in Vimto. He said over the years, he said that Vimto supply got less and less. So he said that's how he thought he knew strawberry was perhaps in trouble, because the Vimto supply was getting less. Fascinating. But yeah, I think this single, and Peter tells the same story, and it's interesting because when Joy Division came to Strawberry 79, 80, obviously Peter had been in the music business since the 60s. And he did say he was starting to find the same thing. He had a bit of a disconnect with the music that was being recorded. Up until that point, he'd probably be, you know, he'd like the music that he was actually working on. And he recognized that music is a young person's game normally. So that is why people like Chris Nagel, Martin Lawrence, and obviously Martin Hannett, who's the factory producer, were kind of becoming more influential in Strawberry, because Peter was recognizing the music wasn't necessarily his thing. So he could appreciate good musicianship, and he could appreciate that the public were buying them, but he just didn't have that connect in the same way you just said.
Yeah, because Peter, I remember him saying he did do some work with Joy Division, but in the end handed it off to Hannett, or maybe, but they came as a package, did they?
Yeah,
Martin?
Hannett would have been there, but he handed it over to Chris Nagel to be Hannett's assistant. So
I see, right.
So he was kind of distancing himself. But I think he did recognise that, you know, he didn't necessarily have the ear for that music. So, but it was interesting because obviously by then Strawberry was changing, and a different generation of musicians from those Peter had grown up with were coming in to use the studio.
I just believe you keep on digging for 1,000 years. Then we get to say much. Then we get to talk. Tell us a little bit, but not too much.
A certain ratio, Houses in Motion, which you may know as a Talking Heads song, but a certain ratio covered it in 1980. But it led to perhaps the strangest appearance at Strawberry, because the person who was going to do the vocals on a certain ratio was Grace Jones, famous American singer. Yeah. The day before she came into Strawberry to meet with a certain ratio, she had that famous Russell Harty TV interview where she slapped him because she said he turned his back on her. And then the next day she went to Liverpool to do something for Granada. And then she came to Strawberry to meet up with a certain ratio. The idea was going to be that she recorded a vocal for this song, but it never happened. And I don't know whether she actually did a guide vocal or anything, but she came along to Strawberry. Kevin Cummins has taken some great pictures of her inside Strawberry reception with a certain ratio, and the track was never released. But when we did in 2017, when it was the 50th anniversary, we were lucky enough to get into the Strawberry building, and we rebuilt the control room for a weekend. It turned into longer than a weekend, but we rebuilt the control room, and Donald Johnson of a certain ratio got in touch with us and said, I've got the tape that says a certain ratio and Grace Jones on the cover. So he lent it us for the weekend to put on top of some of the machinery we had in there. So it was just the whole story of Grace Jones coming to Stockport just seems so unlikely. It's just a shame that she didn't get to do the vocal. But ACR did then release Houses in Motion a few years ago as a kind of in their retrospective, looking back. So just for the story it tells, even though she's not on there, this is my number 7.
Everybody's happy nowadays by the
That's my number
Buzzcocks.
4.
Okay. Well, you've answered my first question. I've always got a lingering doubt, were these tracks actually recorded at Strawberry, but that clearly was.
Yeah.
It's one of my favourite Buzzcocks singles anyway. It's a magnificent track, but I'm not sure what they didn't record that much at Strawberry. Do you know which was it just that single or?
That was I mean, they did come back, but I don't know. I don't think they did albums or anything like that. But
Right.
they did, and this for me is kind of symbolic of the kind of changing guard of music. So it was 79, I think it came out. So probably recorded a bit before then. But it's kind of a marker between Godley and Cream recording Consequences. And spending however long in Strawberry doing that, and recording like 30 seconds a day or whatever it was. So everything that was is kind of blown away by this kind of music, this song.
Yeah.
So it's just a contrast, if you like, with what's gone before.
Agreed. Although the actual music, despite being really fast and in your face, is pretty sophisticated. What Shelley is actually doing with a song, it's got sophistication harmonically, just like Kevin and Lowell have. So it's wearing different clothes, but it's still great music as far as I'm concerned.
There's also the story that after they had recorded this, they went to a local Greek restaurant.
Yeah.
And were told by Martin Russian, who was producing it, that they had to put the B-side together. And I believe, they were quite meticulous in their kind of composing songs, but he insisted they do one virtually on the spot. So the B-side of that single is Why Can't I Touch It? And they kind of, unlike them, they recorded that very quickly. And that's also a very interesting and nice song to listen to. So if you haven't heard that one, have a listen to that.
I am going to listen to that. So an A and B killer combination. Brilliant. Okay, number 6, please.
Okay, so in a similar vein, I'm going with the Smiths. Hand in Glove.
That's my number 5.
So the Smiths recorded their first 2 singles at Strawberry. So Hand in Glove and this, I've forgotten what it is now.
This Charming Man.
Charming Man.
Because I thought that one wasn't recorded at Strawberry, but
first 2 singles were Strawberry.
Okay, marvellous. Okay.
So again, representative of the fact that the Smiths were going to go on and become massive. superstars in terms of music. And I just like the fact that they started in Strawberry. And Morrissey doesn't talk about Strawberry much, but Johnny Marr, in his autobiography, paints a very vivid picture of them recording and then coming out. And he talks about the mists of Stockport kind of and how evocative it was of that kind of era. So, yeah, I've chosen it partly because of the band, but I do like this song as well. This is probably, I think, my favourite Smiths track.
It's funny if because I wasn't quite sure whether This Charming Man was recorded there. I think I prefer that. So
Okay.
can I change my number 5 to,
Yeah,
to This
you can.
Charming Man? Although
Yeah.
they're both brilliant songs, and yeah, I love the Smiths, of course.
The question was, having recorded their first 2 singles at Strawberry, why they didn't then record an album in Strawberry. And we spoke to CJ, Chris Jones, who helped engineer the sessions.
Right.
And his suggestion was that the reason they couldn't book the album time in Strawberry was because 10cc were back in 82, 83 recording Windows in the Jungle. So
Wow.
there was no space for anyone else to come in, which is quite intriguing. But the Smiths went down to London to record their album.
Yeah, they had quite a checkered history of recording early on, the Smiths. I seem to remember they recorded their entire debut album and then scrapped it and re-recorded it with somebody else. But interesting to hear that, Windows in the Jungle, was it worth kicking the Smiths out for? I don't know. Not my favourite 10cc album.
Oh no, I like that one. I think that's, yeah, absolutely. I think
Okay.
it might have been released. If some of the songs on there had been released 6-7 years earlier,
Okay.
they would have been received a lot. I mean, obviously that goes without saying because obviously tastes change.
Right, on to my number 6.
Oh, such a fool. The least of my trouble is right here beside me, and you deserve more than my dreams will allow. But when I'm distracted by crazy ambition, you have to remember the words I say now.
Which is The Least of My Troubles by Paul Nicholas. This is a bit of an obscurity. Now, I don't know whether you even know this track. It's from a musical called Blondel, written by Tim Rice and Stephen Oliver. It's a big favourite of mine. And Paul Nicholas, of course, the well-known actor, comedian, singer, who had several hit singles in the 70s, actually, didn't he? And appeared in Tommy and all that kind of stuff. But the only reason I know this track was recorded at Strawberry was because when Sean and I interviewed Tim Rice, he said that he'd only been in Strawberry once, and it was to work or to produce this track with Paul Nicholas, A and B side. I haven't actually got a copy of it. I've found it's on Discogs, so it exists. It doesn't say that doesn't say that it was recorded at Strawberry, but I'm pretty sure. Well, no reason to disbelieve that it was, and it was 1983, I think, 1982, 83.
Means nothing to me. So you're educating me now. Which
Okay.
is what I like about Strawberry's history, because I'm always finding songs that I find are recorded in Strawberry that I didn't know about. So
Yeah,
yeah.
Are you still finding them? And so how does that work? Do you actually look in like record credits or search the internet, or do you just find them on
internet? But also just go into charity shops. My favourite hobby is going into charity shops and trawling through their vinyl. And I mean, for example, I found one a couple of years ago by the Dobcross Brass Band.
Right.
Which it just has Strawberry written on the back, and
Sure.
that's how I find some that I didn't know about. So I mean, it's fascinating. I am still finding them, and there's one you've just given me one that I didn't know about.
Yeah, well, I'll put the details on. Well, I'll send you the details. But yeah, so A and B side.
Have you not tried to contact Paul Nicholas?
No, that's a very good idea.
Because he was on the One Show the other week.
Yeah, he's just doing a kind of promotional cycle, isn't he? Yeah.
Was he in? He was in something on stage, wasn't he? Was it Only Fools and Horses or something like that? I can't remember. He
Yes,
was in something.
I think you're right. That's a very good idea. I
I think
will.
your job is to contact him and ask him for his Strawberry memories.
Right, I shall. I'm on it.
The least of my troubles is knowing I want you and facing the fact I'm not much on my own. The worst that could happen would be that you left me, for then I'd have troubles like I've never known.
Okay, we're into the top 5.
Well, you've taken a couple of my top 5 already, so
Oh yeah. What was your 5?
5 was Joy Division, Love Will Tear Us Apart.
Oh, we've done that, and
My
I think
4
I've
was
taken your 4.
Buzzcocks, Everybody's Happy Nowadays.
Okay, well, my 4 isn't the Buzzcocks, it's the Heebie-Jeebies.
So I'll have to do what I did yesterday. And sing you meaningless songs in very high voices with 1,000 fire days. Meaningless songs in very high voices in a pair of
And
yes.
meaningless songs in very high voices, which just a fantastic song.
It is. The whole album that they recorded is absolutely fantastic, and it includes a Mickey take of St. Winifred's as well.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's St. Winifred's. I can't remember what the exact artist they've chosen is, but it's very funny.
Some of the best musical parodies are, brilliant in their own right, like the Ruttles, for example, which is brilliant musically. And I think the whole album is fun, but the track, Phil Pope and Richard Curtis wrote it. I didn't even realize Richard Curtis co-wrote it until today when I looked at it. It's just, it's hilarious, and it's a spot-on kind of spoof of the Bee Gees, of course.
They didn't like it, did they? I believe. Did they not get quite heated about when somebody raised it with them? I believe.
I think I've heard different things about that. I'm just going to, because, what were they? Yeah, I mean, they might not have liked to be called the Cribb brothers, Gary, Norris and Dobbin. Which is,
and also meaningless songs, but
I can't remember.
I thought I'd read somewhere that somebody had raised it with them and they kind of got very cross, but who knows? I mean, one day they were very cross, and then the next they probably quite liked it. But
no, actually, I'm probably mixing it up with. I think they enjoyed the Kenny Everett spoof. You must remember that. Where
yeah,
I think.
So the artists on this were Phil Pope, Mike Fenton Stevens, and Angus Deaton.
Yeah,
and, we've got a great photo somewhere, which is on one of my sites, of those 3 in Strawberry performing, that was taken by Roger Barnes, who was the factotum at Strawberry, which I think is a great job title.
He was what, sorry?
He was the factotum. Have
What's
you never
that?
come across a factotum?
No, please enlighten me.
That was his actual job title. It's basically Dog's Body. His job was to keep artists happy. So I think on Mike Harding's album, it thanks Roger for going getting the chip butties and things like that. So
right, okay.
It's one of the jobs that was kind of probably got rid of when Strawberry changed hands, when Peter wasn't in charge. Phil Pope is a brilliant musician, brilliant. And then you hear some of the stuff he's done. I think it's absolutely brilliant. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, brilliant musically as well as lyrically. He wrote a lot of the Spitting Image.
I was going to say, did he do the Chicken? So.
I don't think that's his finest moment, but it was a #1 hit. Yeah, the Heebie-Jeebies. It's spot on, and there's a great clip. I'll try and insert it of them. They're singing live as well, 3-part harmony. I mean, the 3 of them.
Yeah,
they went out on tour and everything, didn't they? So I think so.
And again, it fits in with the kind of Strawberry kind of weird and wonderful.
Okay, top three time. What's your number
Oh, yes.
three?
So my top three, I'm quite pleased to say that, so having said that, I've chosen some of these for the artists, and I'm not always, like you said, not always 100% with the music. My top three musically, I do like on a par with 10cc. So, and number three does actually include 10cc. Again, I'm a bit naughty, but Neil Sedaka, Love Will Keep Us Together. Obviously, I wanted Sedaka in there because his being at Strawberry was a pivotal moment for the studio. They'd had a hit with Neanderthal Man, Hot Legs, but to have some kind of international recognition was important. And having somebody like Sedaka, who was a hero to people like Peter Tattersall and Eric Stewart, they'd grown up with his music in the 50s and 60s. So, and he's another one we've got to thank Harvey Lisberg for bringing him to Strawberry. Because as Harvey says in his book, he told Sedaka that one of the songs that Sedaka liked had been recorded in Strawberry, and if he was in Britain, he would take him there and let him look around and meet the musicians, and he did. So Sedaka was at the Batley Variety Club, and his career had gone right down. He was doing the kind of cabaret circuit, and came into Strawberry to meet the musicians. Thought about just doing a few demos initially, but then that expanded to doing the whole album, and then he liked it so much and was a success that he came back and recorded a second album again with 10cc, as they then were backing him, and Eric engineering. So Love Will Keep Us Together is on the second album. So it's kind of symbolic of Sedaka being there, but I also like the song, and I also like the supposed link with Joy Division's Love Will Tear Us Apart, because there is a fair few people who say that Ian Curtis wrote Love Will Tear Us Apart as a contrast, a deliberate contrast to Love Will Keep Us Together, and the fact they were both recorded in the same place. Did Joy Division know that at the time? I don't know, but a few people have said that was the case. So I just like the link between the two songs, and they're both Stockport produced.
En Inglaterra me conocen mucho. Aquí nadie. Pero después del programa espero me quieran un poco. It's a shame to think about yesterday. It's a shame, a
We've been running round in our present state, hoping help would come from above. But even angels that made the same mistakes in love, in love, in love, in love.
Sea Breezes by Mike McGear. The McGear album, famously Paul McCartney's brother Mike, ex of the Scaffold, and a really good musician in his own right. And this album recorded at Strawberry, of course. Who was working in the day and who was working in the night? I think
It keeps changing.
Yeah.
But Peter is adamant about, because he keeps saying people do it the wrong way around.
Right.
Go on, you tell me what you think it is.
I can't actually remember, so please just tell me what the right way around.
10cc day,
Yeah.
McCartney night.
Right, so 10cc recording sheet music during the day. Yeah, it's a great album of gear, isn't it? Sea Breezes just got, it's a cover, it's written by Brian Ferry, but it's just so dramatic, and the closing 15 seconds, like the most dramatic 15 seconds of any record I can think of. It's got this fantastic climactic sax solo by Brian Jones, not the Brian Jones who had died, obviously, of the Rolling Stones, but by Brian Jones, a Merseyside player who used to be in the Undertakers.
Again, this is a band I wanted to include, but then the track, there was no choice really. So I've gone for Barclay James Harvest, a good northern band who came into what was Intercity back in the day. So back in 1967, they were actually coming into Intercity.
Oh, wow,
with the famous tale, because Barclay James Harvest sound is based on the mellotron. Big, heavy instruments that were too heavy. It was too heavy to get up the stairs into the studio above Neald and Hardy's. So the lovely story is that they just placed it in the shop window of Neald and Hardy's and ran the cables up to the studio. So you actually had whoever it was playing it from Barclay James Harvest sitting in the shop window performing. So all these people would have been walking past the shop, would have looked in the window and just seen this guy sat there playing his mellotron, not realizing that the cable was running up to the studio. So they were, Barclay James Harvest were serious Strawberry clients, you know, they came in quite a lot. But in 1976, they recorded an album called October On. And on that album is a track called Suicide, ? Which is a song about basically a guy who throws himself off a building. Or does he? That's the question mark. And at the end of the song, with Barclay James Harvest playing underneath, there's a little audio drama at the end of the song.
Just in time.
Where it's all reenacted out. So you actually hear the guy who's eventually going to throw himself off the top of this building, walking down the street, going to the hotel, getting in the lift, going up to the top floor, and he obviously stands on the edge. And then you hear this little voice whisper, just in time. And then you hear him falling off the building. And the tale of how that audio drama was put together. So Peter says the sound of somebody walking down the street is a member of Barclay James Harvest in clogs walking down the street outside Strawberry. The hotel reception is just the Strawberry reception with lots of people crammed in, just chatting. The sound of the lift going up in the hotel is the famous Strawberry freight lift.
Yeah.
That was then used by Martin Hannett later on. So, and then the sound of the person falling off the building was the same dummy head that was used by Godley and Cream,
Wow.
you know, in Consequences.
Yeah.
where they put it under a board and shoveled sand on it to make it sound like somebody being buried. Well, this one for Barclay James Harvest, they actually dropped out of the Holiday Inn in Manchester and recorded the sound of it hitting the floor. So it's a lovely splat sound.
Well, so hang on. So they deliberately ruined a mic then? Presumably it couldn't have survived.
Oh, it must have done. Yeah.
Well, they actually, that was a real
Well, I don't
sound
know
of
if they
something.
ruined the mic, but they dropped a dummy head out of the window.
Yeah,
so,
that sound is really something
that sound
falling
was
through
lovely,
the air.
But the whole song,
Wow.
the fact that that little drama's on the end, I think it's just, I like the song anyway. I don't know if you know the song. I encourage you to listen to it.
I do.
And also, the other thing I did like was, as you know, we've rescued a few tapes over the years.
We have.
That have sat in the Strawberry archive. And one of the tapes we rescued was the music that plays under this audio drama. We actually had that on one of the little tape boxes we rescued. It just says BJH, suicide, play out music or whatever. So it was just nice to hear that without the audio drama as well. So the various reasons why I've chosen this song, but I do like it as a song as well.
Just going to record a quick insert here because I made a mistake, which I only caught very late on. I'd put at number 2, my number 2, a track by Barclay James Harvest, which I love, called Titles. Lovely song from their 1975 album Time Honored Ghosts. And I just assumed that was a Strawberry recording, but it isn't, even though the next 2 albums by Barclay James Harvest, October On and Gone to Earth, are Strawberry recordings. This one isn't. It was recorded in San Francisco, produced by Elliot Mazer, Neil Young's producer. So it's ineligible, unfortunately. And then I thought, okay, what I'll swap in a Mandala Band track. Mandala Band was David Roll's Lord of the Rings adjacent musical extravaganza project that he masterminded and was made at Strawberry over the period, I think, of 1976 to 1978. It's a fascinating record, and it's also the only place you'll get to hear Eric and Graham and Kevin and Lol together on a 1978 album, because that's when it was released. Eric and Graham and Kevin all sing lead on this, and I think Kevin's is the star turn of the bunch. Really great vocal on his track, The Witch of Waldo Wood. But ultimately, I don't think those individual songs are strong enough to feature in the top 10, so I had to think again.
I wrote and recorded Blue Guitar at the Strawberry Studios in Stockport. The Moody's were still together at that time, so there was no there was no chance at all of releasing it as a solo record. But I'm happy to say that it came out under the Blue Jays umbrella, the same recording a few years later. It was recorded with Eric Stewart on guitar and engineer, Lol Cream on gizmo, and Kevin Godley on drums and Graham Goldman on bass. And I originally called it You Are, which is a terrible title. And Lol Cream said to me, it just doesn't work, You Are, unfortunately. He said, try something else. So I took 10 minutes and came back with Blue Guitar, The Fortune of... He said, that's it.
Off we go, Kathy. 2 of the boys from the Moody Blues, Justin Hayward and John Lodge, have made a record of their own, and it's called Blue Guitar.
Peter, what is your number 1 non-10cc track recorded at Strawberry?
So, again, I'm going to start with the band. A band, again, who had strong local connections and strong Strawberry connections. So the band is Sad Cafe.
Great.
And you're already worried that I'm perhaps going down the Strawberry South route, but I'm not, so don't worry. So Sad Cafe, in fact, Paul Young recorded again in Intercity back in 1967 with
That's
Frank
the
Renshaw.
Troggery 5 he was in, wasn't he?
Toggery, and also
Toggery
the
5, sorry.
Young and Renshaw were also just a solo pair.
Oh,
so
okay.
he had been in Intercity, and then in the mid-70s, two separate bands combined. So Gyro and the Mandala band that David Roll was putting together kind of merged to form Sad Cafe. And some of their early tracks were recorded in Strawberry North.
Okay.
But they hit it big, obviously, when they went into Strawberry South with Eric Stewart producing. So Facade's album, which had Everyday Hurts, which is their big kind of most well-known track, which again I think is wonderful. And then they did a second album at Strawberry South. But then after that, in 1980, 81, they came home to Stockport. And with Martin Lawrence producing, they recorded an album called Olay. And on that is this track, which I think is better than Everyday Hurts. Although I have got a recording somewhere. I don't know if you remember the Radio 1 program Round Table.
Oh, yes.
Where they would get major artists to come in and review that week's records. So I've got one episode on tape somewhere where Eric and Graham were in, and it was interesting for a number of reasons, one of which they reviewed Wedding Bells by Godley and Cream. But they also reviewed this track, and the track is Follow You Anywhere.
Just one smile says everything. Don't need to ask you where you've been. I'm a fool to hang around you, but I love you. Follow you anywhere. I'll do anything you say.
Great, and a track for me to seek out. I don't know that track.
I love it. I think it's great.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, my number one, Neil Sedaka, and this could have been lots of different songs, particularly from the Trala Days Are Over. Although I also like some of the Solitaire album as well. Of course, I've picked Our Last Song Together.
Oh yeah.
Which was a UK hit single, which has a very interesting story in and of itself, because I'm sure you know this, Neil Sedaka was about to end his songwriting partnership with Howie Greenfield that had stretched back over a decade, and the two of them had written all those classic songs from the late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah.
And Neil Sedaka wanted to do something different, and he was about to start writing with Phil Cody, or had already started with Phil Cody, because Phil Cody wrote the lyric to Solitaire, I think. So Neil kind of dropped the bombshell, and apparently the next morning he received a letter from Howie, which was the lyrics of Our Last Song Together, which it's a real tearjerker, because it's like an affectionate, almost romantic end to this amazing songwriting partnership. It's an amazing song. Although the coda to that is that, having decided they were splitting up as a songwriting team, they wrote this song, Our Last Song Together, and then the next day thought, oh well, that's good, let's just try another one to finish it off, and they wrote Love Will Keep Us Together the following day.
Brilliant.
Which is, Neil writes about this, so incredible amount of creativity.
So it wasn't their last song together.
No, I know. That's the ironic.
That's ruined your story, Paul.
Well, no, I think it just makes it all the more
adds to it. Yeah,
all the more wonderful. It's a beautiful song, and there's a lot of 10cc on this they play, you know, they do the backing. It's beautiful sympathetic backing, and you can just about hear their harmonies. I mean, I think a lot of the harmonies on the Sedaka albums were probably self harmonies, because I don't know, I've listened quite hard to scrutinize it, and sometimes you can make out like Kevin's voice or Eric's voice, but I think a lot of the voices may be multi-track Neil's. But nonetheless, it's a fantastic song.
Days of devils, kings and clowns, angel songs and birthday tunes, valentines and wishing wells, magic stairways, moons and Junes, silly rhymes, monkey shines, pictures on his face. Down the records go, time to turn the page. This will be our last song together. Words will only make us cry. This will be our last song together. There's no other way we can say goodbye.
I think we've included some great songs in that list. Are there any that didn't quite make the list for you?
Oh, probably hundreds. But I mean, some of them were quite obscure ones that I hear, and there was a mud track in there, which I toyed with, and I can't remember which one it is now. Just let me see if I can find reference to it.
Sure.
Go on, you tell me a couple of yours.
Well, I had Sweet America by Barry Greenfield.
Oh yeah.
Which has a strong 10cc involvement again, in that they're playing on the track, and Graham, I think, wrote an uncredited middle eight to the song. I had Glory Glory Man United,
Yeah.
and Jilted John. Now, was that actually recorded at Strawberry?
Yeah.
But you know, when I actually listened to it, I thought, nah.
And I started straying into territories of tracks that were recorded elsewhere but mastered in Strawberry, or Martin Hannett did that quite a lot.
Yes.
Where he would bring tracks in. So OMD, Electricity, was recorded elsewhere but mastered in Strawberry. So I kind of started stretching it too far. So I wanted to try and keep to tracks that were actually, you know, recorded in Strawberry.
Peter, thank you very much for bringing me your top 10 Strawberry tracks. Been very enjoyable, and the fact that, you know, we had 20 tracks and we still didn't include all the ones we wanted just shows what a wealth of musical history was made at those studios. So thank you very much.
Thank you for educating me as well.
You're welcome.